Good day, everyone. I am Jaleel Mata from Group 10, and I will be sharing with you David Hume's An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. A Scottish philosopher, historian, economist, and essayist by the name of David Hume. He is renowned for his skepticism and empiricism and is recognized as one of the greatest philosophers to write in English. His major philosophical writings continue to have a significant impact today. Why is recognizing human nature significant? Being born for action and pursuing a purpose in accordance with the perceived value of the things is the primary focus of the study of human nature. We are compelled to walk the pathways of morality since it is thought to be important above all. Philosophers examine human nature to find the laws that direct our thoughts, elicit our emotions, and determine what we approve of. Philosophers aim to win the approval of the wise despite their speculations being incomprehensible. They believe their work will uncover some truths which will help in the education of future generations. A man's virtue. Man is reasonable for he acquires knowledge from science but has limited human comprehension. Man is sociable but does not always enjoy being with others. Man is an active being for he must carry out his responsibilities. Yet he also needs time to himself. Mankind generally prefers easy philosophy to uncertainty. The characteristics and quality that we see inspires us with variety of emotions such as praise or blame. An artist is better to succeed with imaginative thoughts, workings of emotions, and understanding the internal which discriminate the vice and virtue. The mind has variety of abilities, where perception can be reflection, and consequently, there is a truth and falsehood in every claim made on this subject, and a truth and falsehood that are within human understanding. According to David Hume, in order to understand human understanding is by properly examining it while accepting exhaustion in order to live at ease. We should not let superstitions be as it is. Instead, find new truths and purge the false. Even if there were no benefits to be gained from these studies beyond satisfying an innocent curiosity, it is the path to new opportunities as it gives new knowledge on human species. Origin of the ideas. There is a difference in how the mind perceives things. When we try to imagine the sensations we experience, we can almost see or feel them, but we can never quite match their intensity. However, we are unable to reproduce these perceptions when the mind is distorted. Lively perceptions are when we hear, see, feel, love, hate, desire, or will. Less lively perceptions are conscious or reflections on any of the sensations aforementioned. Our thoughts may seem limitless, but it is actually restricted in a small range to which our mental creativity is limited. We alter information provided by our senses and experiences. We combine familiar concepts to create new images. An example given by David Hume is a moral horse. We can imagine virtue from our own feelings and the appearance of a horse which we are familiar with. David Hume believes in two arguments. First is no matter how complex our thoughts are, we discover that they can be reduced to basic concepts. The second is a man having an organ defect. Restore whichever sense he is lacking, and it will open a channel of ideas. Because their ideas have never been presented to us, we are unable to comprehend the senses they possess. All abstract concepts are inherently fragile. Only a wild estimate can be made about them. Entangled with other related concepts, when we use a term frequently, even if its definition is ambiguous, we tend to believe it is connected to a certain concept. All impressions and sensations are strong and vivid, with more clearly defined boundaries. It is also challenging to make any error regards to them. We may reasonably anticipate that by making concepts so obvious, any ambiguity surrounding their actuality and nature will be eliminated. Section 3 of the Association of Ideas tells us that there is a relationship between different mental conceptions. When one appears in memory, another is introduced. To David Hume, the enumeration of the principles of association that is worthy of curiosity is resemblance, contiguity in time or place, and cause or effect. The principle of resemblance is that it makes each idea resemble impressions that one has previously had. An example is an image of a mountain might make us suddenly think of the mountain. A concept that links ideas is contiguity in time or space, which refers to the idea that thinking about one object or event might make you think of another that is similarly placed in time or space. For example, when one thinks about a specific beach, they might also consider a rest house nearby, which prompts them to reminisce on their time spent at the rest house by the beach. Experience reveals connections between cause and effect. Past observations are necessary in order to generate an effect, since otherwise, the mind would merely conjure up potential outcomes for hypothetical events. An example for this is when we think of a wound, we consider the pain it will cause. Section 4 of Skeptical Doubts Concerning the Operations of the Understanding. Every object of human reason can be arbitrarily split between relations of ideas where truth can be established by evidence, and matters of fact where every fact still has a chance of being untrue, as it can never imply a contradiction and is consistent with reality. Matter of fact and cause and effect are able to transcend the evidence provided by our memories. If we put trust in past experience and make it the standard for future judgment, these arguments will be regarded as a matter of fact. As per David Hume, it is a subject worthy of curiosity, because we inquire what is the nature of that proof that convinces us substance of fact beyond the records of our memory. Hume limits himself to a simple task and pretends to simply provide a negative response to the issue at hand. He contends, then, that our inferences from experience on the workings of cause and effect are not supported by logic or any other understanding process, that we must make an effort to both defend and explain this response. Nature only gave us knowledge of a few superficial qualities or objects. Our senses inform us of color, weight, and consistency of bread, but it does not inform us of its nourishment for the body. When a new object is produced and we see that it is similar, we assume that its qualities are also the same. The mind can only create the product of either relations of ideas or impressions obtained through the senses, which correlates to matter of fact. Arguments can be categorized into two types: demonstrative arguments, which address the connection between ideas, and moral arguments, which address existence and reality. It is impossible for arguments based on experience to prove resemblance to the past and future, because these arguments are founded on the supposition of resemblance. If we are not aware of our ignorance, we won't increase our knowledge. The ignorant improves by experience and learn the qualities of natural objects by observing the effects which resulted from them. Section 5. Skeptical Solutions of These Doubts. Philosophy, whether academic or sceptic, cannot merge with any natural attachment because it lacks the disordered passion of the human intellect. It consistently expresses skepticism and rejects conjectures that go beyond accepted norms. This philosophy constrains our inquiries of common life. If reason is not used to convince the mind to take this action, another principle with equal weight and authority must be used. This principle will continue to have an impact as long as human nature is the same. A person without experience could never assure his reasoning in any matter of fact, and can only be assured by what was present to his memory and senses. Custom or habits guiding concept. Because of tradition, when an act is repeated, the desire to repeat it arises spontaneously without thought motivation. One still draws conclusions from experience even when they are not based on knowledge at all. Not everything we see or experience will be the same to another situation, and pure experience cannot be established without some process of thought and reflection on what was observed. The guide for human life and the only thing that makes our past experiences lead us to anticipate a similar course of events in the future is custom. All inferences from experience, therefore, are effects of custom, not of reasoning. Our conclusions from experience enable us to go beyond memory and perception and assures us of matters of fact from the past. If you believe in something, there should be a reason then a fact connected to it. If you cannot justify and state facts, then your belief is without foundation. All belief of matter of fact is derived from objects present to the memory or senses, and must be customary conjoined with another similar object. Operations of the soul like anger, passion, and love are types of natural instincts that cannot be prevented by cognitive and understanding processes. The mind has control over all ideas and could make this particular idea to fiction and be able to believe whatever it please, contrary to what we find by daily experience. An example is we are able to imagine an animal with a man's head and a horse's body, but we are not able to accept that such an animal has ever actually lived. Whenever an object is presented to the memory or senses, it immediately carries the imagination to picture the object with a feeling or sentiment by the force of custom. The difference of belief and fiction. Belief is based on how thoughts are conceived and how they feel to the mind. Fiction weighs more in the thought and gives them superior influence on the passions and imagination. Nature has formed connections between various ideas, and as soon as one idea enters our minds, its opposite is introduced and draws our attention to it with a subtle movement. After all, the bonds that unite our thoughts together are resemblance, contiguity, and causation. Any object can easily convey to the mind on what is thought about, but only the actual presence of an object can make us imagine it with superior vivacity. Distance is a factor in imagining. He is more affected by things that are closer to him than when he is 200 miles away from it. For example, a friend died. You unbury him and see him again. Memories of intimacies will be in your thoughts as you reminisce them. But when he is buried and you can't see him anymore, you have vivid image about the past. Therefore, the image influences us because we believe that our friend once existed. Direct contact to home can never excite our ideas of home unless we believe that home really exists. When a sword is leveled at my breast, the idea of wound and pain strike me more strongly than when a glass of wine is presented to me, because the sword is sharp, and we all know that it is harmful if it is near any part of the body. But the glass will only become harmful when it shatters. The present object created a customary transition to the idea of another concept. Section 7 of the idea of necessary connection. When a term in geometry is defined, the mind immediately and automatically substitutes the definition for the term. If no definition is used, the item itself may be presented to the senses and understood clearly and slowly. Similar objects are easily mistaken for being the same. As a result, the conclusion eventually strays far from the grounds. It is impossible for us to think of anything which we have not antecedently felt, either by our external or internal senses, as all ideas are copies of our impressions. We become satisfied with our progress as nature puts a stop to our enquiries and limits us to recognize our ignorance. And the main barrier to our progress in the moral or metaphysical sciences is the mental difficulty and uncertainty. There is nothing that can suggest the idea of power in any specific instance of cause and effect because the mind receives no sentiment or inner impression from this series of events. It is impossible for us to foresee an object's impact before it ever occurs. However, if the mind could determine the importance of any cause, we could anticipate the results even in the absence of prior knowledge, and we could initially do so with certainty based only on our thoughts and reasoning. When we perceive any power or energy in the will through consciousness, we need to understand this power, how it relates to the effect, how the soul and body are secretly united, and the characteristics of both of these substances in order to understand how one is frequently able to exert its influence over the other. We can only learn about the power of our will via experience. And experience simply teaches us how one incident always follow another, without instructing us in the connection that unites them and makes them inseparable. According to Hume, many philosophers agree that intelligence and mind are the only factors responsible for all natural events. The truth and underlying cause of every result is not any natural force or power, but rather the will of the Supreme Being, who intends that these particular objects be combined, rather than what is widely understood as causes, which are essentially nothing more than occasions. For them, God is the one who submits to our will. Ideas that we have are revelations from our Creator. They are not the product of our will. Therefore, God controls everything in the eyes of these philosophers. This sequence of events seem completely random and unrelated. Things happen one after another, yet we never see how they are related. Despite seeming to be on the same page, they never communicate. It would seem that the necessary inference is that humans have no idea of connection or power at all, and that these concepts have no significance in either philosophical or practical situations. This happens because we are unable to have a notion of something that has never crossed our minds or touched our emotions. Connection that we feel in the mind, the customary transition of the imagination from one object to its usual attendant, is the sentiment from which we form the idea of power or necessary connection. Example: the first time a man witnesses the collision of two pool balls. He was unable to declare that the two events were connected. He simply thinks that they were joined. After observing multiple occurrences of this kind, he then declares it to be connected. This creates a feeling that these events are connected in his imagination. Every concept is a copy of an earlier perception or sentiment. So if you cannot identify an earlier one, you may be sure that no idea ever existed. One can only suggest the idea of power and necessary connection when many instances appear and the same object is followed by the same event. But if an instance is only done once and we don't have a thought about its following event, or if it will have the same repeated results of events, we don't see a connection to it. To end the presentation, David Hume quoted, "A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence." That's all. Thank you for listening.